Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to our virtual audience joining us from across Canada and around the globe. My name is Brooke Milne, and I'm the Vice Provost and Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at the University of Alberta, and it's my sincere pleasure to be your host for this highly anticipated event, the Western Regional 3MT Finals. I will begin by respectfully acknowledging that the University of Alberta is situated on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to enrich our vibrant community. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you to the City of Edmonton. I am delighted that Ms. Sarah Hamilton, our Ward 5 City of Edmonton Councillor, is also able to join us live today to extend her good wishes on behalf of our city and her constituents. Councillor Hamilton holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Alberta and a Master of Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Prior to becoming a city councillor, Sarah worked as an adjunct professor of media and communications in Chicago. Among her many civic duties, she is an advisor on Council's Indigenous People Strategy and has spearheaded the city's design initiative.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Brooke. Good afternoon, everyone.
My name is
on behalf
Garrity,
of your City Council and the people of Edmonton, it's my great pleasure to welcome you, at least digitally this year, to our city for the 2020 3-minute Thesis Western Canada Regional Competition. Edmonton, as you may know, is one of the youngest and fastest growing cities in the country, and we're home to a tremendous amount of potential. Last year, the Youthful Cities Canadian Urban Work Index named Edmonton the best city for youth to work in based on 48 different indicators, including access to educational, entrepreneurial, and employment opportunities. Edmontonians enjoy an incredible quality of life here, thanks to our affordable standard of living, state-of-the-art recreation centers, and other amenities, not to mention our beautiful river valley and public park system. On top of that, our post-secondary institutions are amongst the finest in the world, and I would know I'm a graduate of one of them. At the city, we envision a future as a city of opportunity, where entrepreneurs, makers, and innovators have the space and resources that they need to grow, play, and explore big ideas. As innovation hubs, our universities are a huge part of this. They're places where the brightest minds are analyzing modern challenges and developing creative solutions that will change the lives of the people around the world. I'm especially thrilled to be part of today's event because the passion of the students presenting today is so evident. And because the work of translating your research and discoveries into plain language is so important. Your passion, your expertise, and your ability to share knowledge makes all our futures brighter. And as we look ahead to a world altered by COVID-19, one of our greatest opportunities as a city is to continue that work alongside our post-secondary partners to shape a healthier, more sustainable, and prosperous future. For Edmonton to continue to grow as a city of opportunity, we must foster a culture of innovation and excellence. And that's exactly what this event is doing today. So I'd like to thank the University of Alberta's Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research for organizing this year's online event. And to all the students taking part in the regional competition, I wish you the best of luck. I look forward to learning more about each of your research areas.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for joining us today on behalf of the City of Edmonton and for joining in our celebration of graduate student research from across Western Canada. It is now my honor to introduce the University of Alberta's Chancellor, Ms. Peggy Garrity. Chancellor Garrity heads our University Senate, and she is also one of our esteemed judges for this event. Chancellor Garrity will offer an inspiring pre-recorded welcome to everyone to the University of Alberta. This will be followed by a short video to orient all of you to our campuses.
Hello, My name is Peggy Garrity, and it's my privilege to serve as the Chancellor for the University of Alberta. Let me begin by saying that the University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Welcome our virtual audience here in Edmonton, across Canada, and around the globe. Welcome the competitors to the 7th Western Regional 3-Minute Thesis competition. The U of A is proud to host this exciting event, bringing together 16 competitors from 16 universities across Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and British Columbia, with the runner-up and winner continuing on to the national finals. The University of Alberta has been a part of the Alberta landscape for more than 100 years. As the Chancellor, I have a keen awareness of the impact a university can have on its local and global community, and how important it is to build connections with our community. The 3MT is an excellent opportunity for a university to share only just a glimmer of the exciting work that takes place on its campus. This academic competition is the brainchild of the University of Queensland, and this year marks its 12th anniversary. In this competition, graduate students are challenged to explain the impact of their research using only one PowerPoint slide, and they have 3 minutes to complete the task. Imagine the challenge of reducing thousands of hours of research and complex ideas into easily understood concepts that have clear outcomes and global or local impact. It's no small challenge. Having made it to the Western Regionals, we know that you, our competitors, are up to the challenge. Congratulations and good luck. I look forward to hearing your brilliant, creative, and innovative ideas come to life over the course of the competition.
We built a university before there was a city surrounding us. No one had performed an open heart surgery, but then we did. We built Alberta's first satellite and sent it into orbit. We discovered hepatitis C, and now we're developing a vaccine. Pushing the boundaries. We've always done it. We're still doing it. And here's what it looks like. It's building a car to challenge the way we think about fuel sources. It's creating opportunities to learn about our Indigenous history and our mountains. It's testing food alternatives to help feed the world. It's about looking at centuries of ice core samples to find answers to climate change. It's learning from our past to preserve our future. It's creating something from nothing that's inspired by everything. It's setting a personal best and a national record. It's taking 36,000 voices and making sure we are heard. Pushing boundaries is about finding out what you are capable of and then pushing yourself beyond what you thought you were. Great things are happening here, and we know you are bound for great things.
I want to thank Chancellor Garrity for her warm welcome. I also want to acknowledge our Senate's strong and continued support of graduate students. Our video that you just watched captures the enthusiasm of more than 40,000 students here at the University of Alberta and reflects their amazing pursuits in research and scholarship across our campuses and those like them across the entire country. Our students do indeed push the boundaries of research, no matter where they are. Like many of you, I've been really looking forward to today because the 3MT finals are just so exciting and truly inspiring. I am proud to introduce the incredible visionary work of 16 talented graduate students from universities spanning from Victoria to Winnipeg. Graduate students are an integral part of research innovation at every university. The inspiration for their respective pursuits of these 16 students no doubt varies and may be driven from deeply personal experiences or a sense of hope to bring meaningful change to the many challenges we face in our world today. These 16 finalists represent the top place finishers in their respective universities' 3MT event. They have each accepted today's challenge to compete in the Western Regional 3MT finals. And by doing so, they acknowledge the importance of communicating the value of their research outside of their respective programs and disciplines. In our new COVID reality, these graduate students have additionally risen to the challenge of producing a video that captures their presentations. Before we watch the first 6 presentations, I would also like to acknowledge our esteemed judges. Chris McLeod is Edmonton Global's Director of Marketing and Communications and has a lead role in building a global brand and investment strategy for the Edmonton metropolitan region. An experienced leader and active community volunteer, Chris has a strong track record of bringing people and ideas together, including raising more than $40 million for community projects across the Edmonton region. He has a BA in political science from the University of Alberta and an MBA from Athabasca University. Leah Ettard is the Executive Director for the Alberta Council for Global Cooperation, with bachelor's degrees in leadership and secondary education and a master's degree in international humanitarian action. She has followed a career trajectory blending her passions for education and international development. This includes working as a consultant with the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies in New York and teaching in secondary schools in Bolivia, China, Kenya, and Canada. Linda Huang is one of Alberta's leading social media strategists and digital communicators. She has gained the reputation as one of Alberta's most recognizable bloggers. Linda has developed social media strategies and content plans for business, government, nonprofit, and post-secondary clients. She's also delivered social media training to hundreds of participants across a range of industries. Linda is also the founder of the Edmonton International Cat Festival. Peggy Garrity, Chancellor of the University of Alberta, is passionate about words and ideas. She owns a consulting firm that works with companies, organizations, and individuals to clarify their purpose and develop their unique brands. Formerly, she served as Chief Reputation and Brand Officer at ATB Financial, where she was responsible for creating ATB's story and transforming its brand in the marketplace. In 2013, Chancellor Garrity was awarded a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Chancellor Garrity holds a Bachelor's of Arts and Master's degree in Sociology from the University of Alberta. Dr. Walter Dixon is the Vice President, Research and Innovation at the University of Alberta. Dr. Dixon liaises with funding agencies and government, helping to foster and build research collaborations. A professor of biochemistry and molecular biology, Dr. Dixon is a graduate of the Universities of Alberta and Cambridge. His research focus is on livestock reproductive performance and the impact of nutrition during gestation on embryo fetal development, lifetime growth potential, and animal health parameters. At the conclusion of our event today, Judge Chris McLeod will announce the winners of the Western Regional 3MT Finals. I want to remind and encourage everyone to register their vote for the People's Choice Award. The link will remain open until 2:15 p.m. today, and you can find it at uab.ca/3MT. Now, let's check out the first 6 student presentations.
Recently, I was in Kenya visiting a community of sex workers that our lab works in partnership with to study HIV. Through talking to them, I learned that unplanned pregnancies are an issue that has pushed many of these women to drop out of school and to turn to sex work so they could feed their children. As Canadians, we're certainly no stranger to the issues of unplanned pregnancy. About 30 to 40% of pregnancies in Canada are unplanned. To promote family planning, there are a variety of contraceptives that women can choose from. Contraceptives, also known as birth control, are drugs or devices that can be used to prevent unplanned pregnancy. One of the most commonly used contraceptive is an injectable drug called DMPA. Why? Because it's affordable and one injection could prevent against pregnancy for 3 months. Now here's the catch. There are research studies that suggest women who use DMPA have a higher risk for HIV infection. Researchers think DMPA can weaken the cellular barrier inside the vaginal tract, making it easier for HIV to sneak in. DMPA can also increase inflammation in the vagina, thus creating an environment that favors HIV infection. And what's even worse is inside this inflammatory environment is a pool of cells that HIV loves to infect called HIV target cells. The focus of my thesis, however, is on a specific immune cell called natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are important because they protect us from cancer and viral infections. Studies have shown that natural killer cells can even help prevent HIV infection. And while we know that DMPA affects many cells of the immune system, we still don't know if DMPA affects natural killer cells. To answer this question, we're using blood from women who use DMPA and then comparing their natural killer cells with women who don't use DMPA. Using a technology called flow cytometry, we will scan these natural killer cells for differences in function and markers of activation. This study will then help us to understand how could DMPA affect the ability of natural killer cells to defend against HIV. In the bigger picture, there are lots of women who use DMPA to protect themselves from unplanned pregnancy. And it's not fair to them that we still don't know how DMPA affects their HIV risk. In the end, no woman should have to use birth control and worry that it might increase their risk for infectious disease. Thank you, and asante sana.
When you live in a country like Canada, where for the most part the sidewalks become ice rinks in the winter, the chances of you falling and hurting your back become pretty high. The misfortunes of our winters aside, whether it's due to a car accident or even while playing sports, 1 in 3 Canadians are likely to suffer from a spinal cord injury before the age of 65. Every year, there are up to 500,000 reported cases of spinal cord injuries, with these people twice as likely to being rehospitalized and up to 5 times more prone to dying prematurely. These facts are spine-chilling, especially when we realize that up to a third of you will potentially be undergoing spine surgery for one reason or another in your lifetime. Now, if that isn't scary enough, here's the catch. Surrounding our spinal cord is a type of fat known as epidural fat, and up until now, spine surgeons commonly consider it to be a space-filling and biologically inert tissue. As such, they will routinely discard it in attempts to increase their operational field of view. Recently, however, a functional population of stem cells was discovered within epidural fat. Now, stem cells are like the blank tiles in a game of Scrabble. These tiles are powerful and can be any letter you want. Similarly, in our bodies, stem cells can become any cell type and have the power to modulate tissue maintenance and repair. This finding, therefore, begs the question, should epidural fat be removed from the body during surgical procedures? And is it really an insignificant tissue if it contains cells that can improve our outcomes post-surgery? My master's project aims to find the role of these epidural fat stem cells within the body and to investigate if and how these cells can respond to injury. Using a genetically modified mouse model in which the epidural fat stem cells are fluorescently labeled, I can track their movement over time as well as their response to an injury in their local environment. So far, I have found that throughout growth, stem cells from the epidural fat migrate towards and enrich the dura mater, which is the protective membrane surrounding our spinal cords. Moreover, when I puncture the dura mater, stem cells are found at the site of injury. These results indicate that epidural fat is likely not a dispensable tissue, as it contains the very cells that can make all the difference in growth and in healing. Overall, my project emphasizes the importance of revisiting that commonly held perception of epidural fat as irrelevant and suggests that spine surgeons adopt protocols in which epidural fat is preserved. Now, whether we end up in surgery due to an injury or even because of back pain, it's important that we walk in knowing that epidural fat, a potential source of both repair and regeneration, has literally got our back.
Hi, my name is Shanti Bergen, and I have a question of the day for you. How many of you feel safe? I know during COVID that's a bit of a tough one when we're uncertain if we can even go to the grocery store. But in general, we can still pick up the phone, call an ambulance, call the police service, call the fire department, and they'll be at our door within minutes. This is something I have taken for granted, huge living in North America. But what about those underground potash mines across Saskatchewan? They don't have that same luxury. If a fire breaks out, they're stuck in bunkers for hours, if not days, until the smoke clears. Which doesn't make a lot of sense. So I decided to look into what causes these fires. And to start, a fire needs 3 things to burn: heat, oxygen, and fuel. Heat is going to happen near a mile below the Earth's surface. Oxygen, kind of going to need it. But the fuel, what's causing these huge fires to develop and stay burning? Turns out it's a highly flammable mineral fluid that's used in the hydraulic systems of these large miners that actually mine the potash. Kind of a big deal. So I started researching and looking into alternatives, and turns out there is synthetic fire-resistant hydraulic fluids that have been used extremely well to solve this problem in tons of different mines across the globe, but never a potash mine. And a potash mine has a very unique environment because it mines very fine dust that can easily get into the hydraulic system and cause a ton of issues. So we need to test it in a lab. So I made 4 identical hydraulic systems that mimicked the hydraulic system on the miners, just in a smaller form. The first one, I put the currently used mineral fluid as a baseline to compare against, and then I chose 3 fire-resistant hydraulic fluids and put them in the other 3. I ran them under cyclic loading conditions for 80,000 cycles, which took 200 hours to test. First test was no contamination, second was ideal amounts of potash contamination, and third was maximum potash contamination. And wouldn't you know it, in every case, one of the synthetic fire-resistant hydraulic fluids outperformed the mineral fluid, whether it was filter analysis, fluid samples, efficiency, performance data, geometric measurements, or your basic photos. This fire-resistant hydraulic fluid always showed greater promise than the currently used mineral fluid. This is incredible. Not only is the performance and efficiencies of the hydraulic system on these miners going to increase if this fluid is used, but the workers underground are going to know that if a spark flies from the ceiling or a hose breaks and sprays that fluid onto the hot surface, it's not going to cause a fire. They're going to get home safely to their families that night, and that is what's most important. Thank you.
I want to talk to you about this number. It's big. And if we're talking about public support for a public policy or the efficacy of a new vaccine, this is the kind of number that really gets researchers excited, and I know because it got me excited. So I want to tell you about how we got it. It all started when I was in undergrad. I lived in an all-boys dorm, and wanting to be upstanding members of our campus community, we organized a blood drive. Now, I wasn't out at the time, so it was a little uncomfortable when a nurse told me that I couldn't donate blood because I'm gay. Now, to be fair, Canadian Blood Services disagrees with this characterization. They insist, but Rob, it's not because you're gay, it's because you recently had sex with another man. And I know what you're thinking. Maybe not so different, those 2 things. But regardless of what you call it, sexually active gay men cannot donate blood in Canada today. And this is perhaps one of Canadian Blood Services and Héma-Québec's more controversial policies. They've been accused of discrimination, stigmatization, sued, and even boycotted over this, and all of that undermines public trust in a really important piece of Canada's medical infrastructure. And we need more donors. Do you know that Canadian Blood Services only collects 17% of the plasma that it needs? The rest is purchased from other countries, and that overburdens an already very expensive public medical system with additional unnecessary costs. This policy also has implications for COVID-19 research. You may have seen in the media recently there's a very high demand for blood products from people who have recovered from COVID-19 because that can be used for vaccine and treatment research. So the media is asking this question, why is this policy still in place? Well, changing it is difficult, and undiagnosed HIV is a real concern, and so we need to get this right because donated blood is transfused into Canadian patients every single day. The problem is we're responding to that risk by only screening for the gender of sexual partners. And in the 80s, maybe that made sense, but I have to believe that we can do better today. My research will lead to a new statistical model that is not blind to the realities of HIV in our communities today. My team and I travel the country looking for grassroots organizations, and we're testing guys for HIV and hepatitis C with a little finger prick. And then we look at those test results in the context of factors like substance use and safer sex practices and partner numbers, and that allows the model to see nuance. That paints a clearer picture of who could or could not be donating blood. Now, because we're talking about public trust, I know that this math can't happen in a vacuum, so I'm also interested in attitudes about the current as well as some potential alternative deferral policies, and not surprisingly, we hear the current policy is discriminatory and makes guys feel like they're stigmatized, and other researchers have actually shown that the way we screen today actually increases homophobic attitudes amongst current active blood donors. But despite all of that, do you know how many guys said that they would donate if they were eligible today? 92%.
This was my Auntie May. She had a stroke. A stroke occurs when a blood vessel in your brain becomes blocked or bleeds, causing damage to the nearby brain tissue. For Auntie May, this damage resulted in complete paralysis of the entire right side of her body. 1 in 5 adults will experience a stroke in their lifetime, meaning you or someone you know will be affected by such consequences of stroke. The good news is that the brain can change in response to the experiences we subject it to, including the experience of physical exercise. This brain adaptability is the foundation behind stroke recovery and rehabilitation, and is most responsive to early and intense training. However, patients like Auntie May with severe body paralysis are the least likely to get that early and intense physical training. It is just too strenuous for them and their therapists to get them up out of bed and practicing ambulation. In other words, practicing walking. Many patients fall prey to this vicious cycle of being unable to perform the very movements that drive their own recovery. And such was the case for Auntie May, who, like 25% of stroke survivors, spent her days in bed and ended up in long-term care. This got me thinking, what can we do as physical therapists to overcome this issue? Enter Robotic Exoskeletons, a new technology developed for spinal cord injury. This device straps around the torso and the legs to perform some or all of the work of standing and walking. What if we could apply this technology in stroke rehab as well to help patients like Auntie May? This question drives my thesis research. I am running the Extra trial at rehab hospitals across Canada with 2 objectives in mind. The first objective is to determine whether this technology can enhance physical therapy and improve walking recovery. By using this technology to get that early and intense walking practice, do our patients with stroke fare better immediately and in the long term? The second objective of my research is to explore the patient experience of using this technology. By interviewing participants in the trial, we'll gain a better understanding of how this device impacts their stroke rehab journey in ways that we just can't physically measure. Overall, the findings from my research will guide the future integration of this technology into clinical practice. This is the first trial of its kind in Canada. Whether we find that 1, it does enhance physical therapy and improves walking recovery, or 2, patients feel empowered simply by getting back up on their feet again, Either of these findings is a step forward for stroke rehabilitation. It is my hope that through this research, we'll be able to offer our patients with stroke, patients like my Auntie May, just a little extra.
As a human, there are several things you can do to make yourself less susceptible to infection. Wash your hands, wear a face mask, physically distance yourself from other people. Now imagine yourself as a grapevine, and you hear that there is a bacterial disease that is spreading across the region where you live. You can't wash your hands, you can't wear a face mask, and you certainly can't physically distance yourself from your neighboring grapevines. As a grapevine, your survival is solely dependent on your growers and how they choose to treat you. But what is a grower supposed to do to prevent a grapevine from getting sick? And once it's already sick, what can be done then? That's where my research comes in. I study a bacterial grapevine disease called crown gall, which is spreading across the cold climate grape-growing regions of Canada. This disease is characterized by the formation of tumors along the grapevine trunk. These interrupt the flow of water and nutrients in the vine, affecting things like how many berries the vine produces, as well as the overall quality of those berries. This in turn affects the quality and flavor of the wine that is produced. If the vine that contracts the disease is young, it is very likely to die. With the wine industry bringing in billions of dollars into the Canadian economy each year, it is clear something needs to be done now in order to combat this potentially economically devastating disease. The main issue is that Canadian grape growers do not have a reliable management strategy to turn to. Several strategies have been tried in the past, and yet the disease has continued to spread, grapevines have continued to die, and thousands of dollars have already been lost. My project looks at two new potential management strategies. The first is an application of short bursts of hot air along the grapevine canopy in order to induce a natural plant defense mechanism, which fights against infection. The second is an application of compost to the base of infected vines in order to enhance overall vine health, as well as to reduce root injury, which triggers the disease. I'm also looking at how other microbes might be able to prevent crown gall in grapevine. I've already been able to find several samples that, at least to some extent, have been able to prevent the growth of crown gall bacteria in the lab, and soon these will be tested in live grapevines. Therefore, although crown gall is a scary diagnosis for a grapevine to receive, my research shines a light on new potential management strategies that may be used to combat this disease in the future in order to preserve our beautiful Canadian vineyards, as well as your favorite locally sourced glass of wine.
I hope you are enjoying the presentation so far. I know I certainly am. In conversations with our finalists, several of them remarked that prior to their participation in 3MT, they would tend to shy away from public speaking opportunities. Now, through this experience, they've gained confidence in their abilities and are adept at speaking about their research to a wide audience. I think you would all agree with me when I say I think they're doing a fantastic job. I would like to share a few comments from our finalists expressing what else they have gained through their participation in 3MT. One finalist notes, "It made me fall in love with my research all over again. I got a renewed motivation to continue my work." Another said, "It has been a rewarding experience that has both reminded me why I like researching my work and has encouraged me to pursue my subject in new ways and with new enthusiasm." Now let's watch the next group of videos.
What if you were excluded from a place you had the right to be? How would that make you feel? I had a student, Michelle. She was brilliant and articulate, but domestic violence characterized her life. However, she had hopes of becoming a lawyer. Then there was my other student, John. He was from a community where the sounds of gunshots replaced lullabies. John struggled academically, but he wanted to be a police officer. Michelle and John got into trouble and were suspended. Suspension is a type of punishment that excludes students from school for days and possibly weeks. Imagine Michelle and John being excluded from their only safe haven. Their question, who cares? As an educator, I care. Accordingly, the purpose of my research was to help students like Michelle and John. I focused on school principal shift from punitive to positive discipline. My research showed that suspension did not improve students' behavior, but negatively affected their academic performance, mental health, and well-being. However, there is hope. My research also showed that positive discipline, such as the use of restitution and the 7 teachings, fixed the problem. The principals and teachers believe that there is good in every student and mistakes are learning opportunities. Through relationship with students, they were able to improve students' behavior by providing support. Improved behavior contributed to increased academic achievement in a safe and caring environment. Although there were challenges such as limited resources, positive discipline worked. The most compelling finding of my research is that positive discipline is for students like my Michelle, the future lawyer, my Johnny, the future police officer, any boy or girl, majority or minority, it is for everyone. Let's not punish our students, but encourage them to learn from their mistakes, grow stronger, and be prepared for the future. They are counting on you, and you, everyone in society. Discipline was meant to teach, not to punish. So punitive, dismiss it. Positive, believe it.
Do you remember these straws? They were really popular during the 90s. Super fun to use but impossible to clean, and once bent, simply useless. The way your smoothie travels through a straw is really similar to the way that blood flow travels inside our vessels. Using Doppler ultrasound, we can analyze this flow in almost every part of the body. You name it, head, neck, limbs, and of course in the largest intra-abdominal organ, the liver. When children receive a liver transplant, surgeons connect the vessels of the donated liver to the vessels of the patient, sometimes unintentionally creating these kinks, loops, or strictures which can modify the blood flow that the liver receives. The liver can suffer, and in some cases, these patients even require a second transplant. Imagine trying to take a big sip of a thick smoothie using a really thin straw, or a bent one. It's like the liver's trying to take a big sip of blood from a 3mm vessel. The liver has 2 sources of blood supply, the hepatic artery and the portal vein. In our project, we used Doppler ultrasound to analyze these structures, and we found out that there was one parameter that could predict complications: the velocity of the flow inside the portal vein. This was slower in patients that developed complications, and when it was lower than 60 centimeters per second, these patients had 5 times greater odds of having a complication. This is an extremely interesting finding because it will help us target patients at high risk of developing complications, even before they develop any clinical sign or symptom. In this way, we can intervene on them early and even prevent a complication from occurring. All of this to ensure that that precious organ doesn't die. If a child has already survived long enough with a life-threatening liver disease, waited long enough for a liver transplant, and survived one of the most complex surgical procedures there is, our effort should be extended to guarantee the best possible outcome for these patients. Not only to increase their chances of survival, but also to honor the lives of all past and future organ donors. Thank you.
Imagine you had to live within your income without knowing what your income is, without knowing the cost of the products you purchase, and without a bank account to track your spendings. Many individuals want to live an environmentally sustainable life, but this is the situation they find themselves in when they try. For example, I know I need to reduce my carbon emissions, but by how much? What is my current carbon footprint? If I don't eat meat and I live in an energy-efficient home with roommates, is it okay for me to fly home and visit my family? The absence of individual-level targets and methods for monitoring one's cumulative environmental impact limits the individual's awareness about the impact of their actions and limits their ability to live sustainably. When people are faced with a threatening situation, such as climate change, but feel they can't do anything to solve the problem, they tend to adopt emotion-focused coping responses, such as distraction or denial. While this may avert persistent emotional distress, it also reduces the individual's attention toward, knowledge about, and action on the problem. So now let's imagine you were asked to live within a carbon budget, but you were provided with a carbon target, the carbon cost of the products you purchase, and a carbon account to track your emissions. These features are present in a policy called personal carbon trading that was investigated by the UK government in 2008. Personal carbon trading is a cap-and-trade system where individuals are assigned a monthly allocation of carbon emissions. Emissions can be bought and sold on the market, and over time, individual allocations are decreased to meet national targets. My graduate research consisted of an online experiment. The study found that compared to a carbon tax, a policy currently in place in BC, personal carbon trading was better at providing individuals with the knowledge required to reduce their carbon emissions. Compared to a carbon tax, personal carbon trading was also perceived to be more effective at enabling individuals to live sustainably. This would be expected to decrease the need for emotion-focused coping, allowing individuals to pay more attention toward and become more knowledgeable on environmental issues. This could create a culture that supports strong political action on environmental issues.
So, let me tell you a little bit about St. John, New Brunswick. If you pass 5th grade geography, you probably know that New Brunswick is what we call a have-not province. So, what does being a have-not province have to do with healthcare anyway? Well, quite a bit actually. As we know, healthcare is a publicly funded resource. So when it comes to healthcare, and specifically prenatal care, being a have-not province means less. There are services and prenatal systems all over Canada that we just don't have access to here in St. John. Services like midwives and services like doulas are only available privately. And when it comes to perinatal mental health services, it's really challenging to access them. Here, prenatal care is covered almost exclusively by family doctors and by specialists. Now, if we can demonstrate that despite all of this, everybody's getting good prenatal care, then we should be fine. But there is not one single investigative report into the status of prenatal care here. So, how do we know needs are being met at all? We don't. St. John has reported time and time again that income and education are major sources of health inequity here. When we look at the context of prenatal care, young age also factors into that equation. So for my thesis, I put together a study consisting of an online survey and one-on-one interviews to investigate how low income, less education, and young age related to prenatal care experiences as they pertain to marginalization, access, and satisfaction with care. So how did it all shake out? Well, people are pretty satisfied with their care, but there's definitely gaps. Most people in the study had a prenatal care provider they were able to access, but they weren't always able to get to their appointments because of things like hidden costs, like parking, or sometimes they couldn't access a service because they were never told about it. There were services people felt would have improved their care, like midwives, but it just wasn't available. There was also a substantial amount of people who said they had issues with mental illness, 29%, but not everybody had it addressed as part of their prenatal care. Importantly, a lot of people found they did experience marginalization. And when we took a deep look into marginalization, it looked like having their concerns dismissed, being stigmatized, and being judged. Finally, participants found that they were very deeply affected by their birth experiences and not always in a good way, to such a point that it totally colored their entire perinatal experience. This was linked to the fact that there was some extremely marginalizing behaviors happening on the main labor and delivery unit, which is the only place of where to give birth in St. John. So what do we do with all of this? Well, going forward, it's going to be really important to address the gaps in mental health services for pregnant people and figure out exactly why there's such an ingrained culture of marginalization on labor and delivery units, because this is not something that's specific to St. John. Research has shown that this is an issue that's pervasive everywhere. But realizing that good access goes beyond just getting in to be able to see a doctor, and helping healthcare professionals identify and reduce marginalizing practices are a few really important ways we can improve prenatal care in St. John. Thank you.
Bumblebee populations across North America are in a nosedive, dropping as much as 87% in just 2 decades. In response, people have planted millions of pollinator gardens, brimming with flowers to give worker bees a buffet. Fantastic! But these gardens miss a vital part of the conservation picture. So let's set the scene. After a long winter hibernating, a lone queen emerges on her own and is immediately on a mission to start her colony. To do this, she first has to find a place for her colony to live. She checks pollinator gardens for the bumblebee equivalent of a bed and breakfast and finds nothing. But what exactly is she looking for? Well, people have noticed that bumblebee colonies tend to pop up in old mouse burrows. Makes sense, like a furnished apartment, it's move-in ready, no digging required. Assuming she is searching for a mouse burrow, imagine what that must look like to a flying queen. The entrance is 2 to 3 centimeters across, that's the diameter of a quarter, which is then hidden below tall grass or leaf litter. How the heck can she spot a small visually obscured hole in the ground? She might as well be looking for a needle in the haystack. Which begs the question, is she really visually looking for it at all? Stumped, I turned to the actual nest searching behavior of queens themselves and learned they do this very characteristic zigzag flight pattern with the overall forward motion. Bingo! This immediately reminded me of what a fly, albatross, and rat all have in common, their behavioral mechanism for odor tracking. See, this graph, top left, actually depicts how animals repeatedly transect the odor plume, going beyond and returning to its pungent center, and resulting in, you guessed it, a zigzag pattern with the overall forward motion. So maybe bumblebee queens follow mouse scent to find burrows. Elated, I couldn't wait to test my prediction. First step, collect mouse pee. Gross, but it would allow me to do a pretty cool test. Using bumblebee boxes, or bird boxes with a smaller entrance, I put mouse pee in them next to unscented controls, functionally presenting queens with a choice between the two. Later, I opened them to find 17 colonies in the ones with mouse pee, and only 6 in the control. That's nearly 3 times more colonies in mouse pee-laden boxes, proving that mouse pee provides a roadmap for bumblebee queens to find nest sites in spring. With this, we can direct queens to supplemental nesting sites to one day turn 1 million pollinator gardens into bumblebee bed and breakfasts. Then I will finally exclaim, there is a saving grace to mouse pee. Thank you.
Our finalist videos sure are going by quickly. I'm certain it will be challenging for the judges to select a winner and for you to decide who will earn your vote for the People's Choice Award. I want to take a moment to share a few more insights into what our competitors take away from 3MT. One student notes, being able to connect with people in this way has been a wonderful experience, and sharing my research with so many people has been more rewarding than I could have ever hoped for. Another remarks, being able to talk persuasively about why the work matters takes it off the page, out of the models, and into the world. And really, why are we all here if not to make real change? I'm sure you will agree that these are impactful words that express future promise to bring meaningful results to these students' respective fields and to our broader communities. Now it's time for us to watch the final suite of videos.
Is there anything more precious than the gift of a child? Parents pour their hearts and souls into their children with big dreams and aspirations for the person they will become. But severe illness and death pay no attention to age. Not all parents get to experience watching their child grow up. The death of a child is a topic no one wants to talk about because even the thought of it is too painful. Children in heart and lung failure are the sickest kids admitted to the pediatric intensive care unit. When the heart and lungs stop working, the rest of the body stops functioning. In order to prevent imminent death, these children are placed on machines that take over the function of their heart and lungs to allow the child time to heal. These machines are called Extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or Ecmo. Ecmo is composed of a circuit containing a pump and an oxygenator connected to two large catheters placed in a large vein and artery in the child's heart. Blood is then pulled from the child and moved through a membrane where oxygen is added. Blood is then pumped back into the artery to be delivered to the rest of the body. But children on ECMO face severe complications. For example, children on ECMO are required to be on blood thinners to help prevent clotting of the ECMO machine, but this must be carefully balanced with the risk of bleeding too much. So if the large catheter in the artery were to accidentally dislodge, the entire blood volume of the child will be lost within a minute. Or if the ECMO machine stopped functioning, the child will require CPR. And these are events that no parent is ever prepared for. My research focuses on exposing the effect that these complications have on the traumatic grief of families. By examining these parental experiences, I intend to underscore the importance of providing the necessary supports to help mitigate their grief when the death of their child is likely. ECMO is often the last hope for recovery of their child, and when these measures fail, withdrawal of ECMO marks the end of hope and recovery for their child. When parents have witnessed their child become so ill and transformed by technology into someone they no longer recognize, their grief will be compounded and contribute to post-traumatic stress disorder. My research will contribute to understanding why additional supports, such as earlier introduction to palliative care teams, timely discussions of realistic outcomes for the child, and consultations with families to understand what that end-of-life process looks like for them, remain of utmost importance. Because while our world may not stop each time a child's life ends, someone else's does.
If you've ever walked around your house at night, you've probably stubbed your toe on a chair or two, or stepped on something you couldn't see. Now imagine if you were trying to do that while flying. You need some way to see the world around you, maybe a form of radar or sonar. If you were a bat, that's exactly what you would do. Bats are amazing animals, and while they can see about as well as we can, they rely on a process called echolocation as well. As they fly, bats are basically yelling the entire time, and those sound waves travel from them, bounce off something in the environment, and come back. So when a bat hears them, it can stitch them together to make a picture of the world and see in the dark. Now, since I study bats, I'd like to be able to see this too, and I've got a very cool way to do it. I've been using an unmanned aerial vehicle, you might call it a drone, to fly above the trees in the forest where I work and take hundreds of pictures from a bird's eye view. I also put out some ultrasonic microphones that can hear which bats are passing by. Back in the lab, I take all those photos, put them together, and I can pull out a three-dimensional model of the landscape I'm looking at. If you look at my slide, I'm showing you two here in 3D and false color of the same trees, but at different degrees of detail. And this is important because different bats see the world differently. We often think of bats as like birds, but that's not really true. The best name I've ever heard for bats comes from Crete, Apowaxes, which roughly translates as cousin of bird. If you look at a bird's wing, it's made from the entire limb, whereas a bat's is made from folds of skin between the fingers. So in this way, you could say that bats are just doing jazz hands all night long. When you look at the aerodynamics of a bat's wings, you can see that this forces different bats to fly in different ways. The larger winged a bat is, the faster and more efficiently it can fly, but it can't turn nearly as quickly or sharply as a smaller winged bat. So it needs to see different information about the world around it. And these larger winged bats will call it lower frequencies, which will travel further but come back with less detail. This is like the model on the left. The smaller winged bats call it a higher frequency. Doesn't travel as far, but comes back very clear, like the model on the right. As you can see, these are two very different ways of perceiving the world around you, and I know which one I would rather fly through. Now, this work is very important because several species of bats are now listed as threatened or endangered in Canada, and we need to take actions to help them. I'm hoping that my work will help us identify habitats that are vital to bat successes, and I'm hoping to save bats by figuring out their way of seeing.
I want to tell you a woman's story. An economic crisis forces a woman and her husband to flee to a near but dangerous country. The husband recognizes that his wife's beauty could entice foreign men to take her for themselves and kill him, so he tells his wife they will claim to be brother and sister. The woman recognizes the vulnerability this will place her in and begs and reasons with her husband against this plan, but he does not listen. After their immigration, the woman hides herself for 5 years in order to avoid being seen and taken by another man. But word of her beauty still spreads until it reaches the country's ruler, who takes her away by force, but offers the brother financial compensation, which he accepts. Eventually, the truth of their relationship comes to light, and the ruler returns the woman to her husband, giving him even more money to make amends. They leave the country, the woman used and abused, the man unharmed and prosperous on her account. This may have sounded like a modern story, but it's actually 2,000 years old. It was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in a scroll we now call the Genesis Apocryphon, a text from the 2nd century BC that was unknown to us until its discovery in 1946. However, the story may have felt familiar to those with a religious background, because the couple is Abraham and Sarah, ancestors of the modern Jewish and Muslim people, and another version of this same story can be found in Genesis 12 of the Jewish and Christian Bibles. But there's a striking difference between the two versions of the story. In the Apocryphon version that I just told you, Sarah is distraught and resists her impending exploitation, while in the biblical account, she is completely silent, an expressionless object passed between two men. My thesis employs the lenses of both biblical and gender studies to compare the Genesis Apocryphon scroll with the biblical book of Genesis and ask questions that have never been asked in Dead Sea Scrolls research. Why did the ancient authors choose to either represent or silence the voices of women in these texts? Why did the silenced version of the story eventually become scripture? And perhaps most importantly, how might the silencing of exploited women in the Bible have laid a foundation for our own cultural moment? The Bible was the foundation of Western culture, and the Genesis Apocryphon is an ancient Me Too story, one that was lost for 2 millennia until its discovery in the last century. It not only gives Sarah a voice, but it calls to account the way the Bible has been misused to historically justify silencing women. The goal of my research is to expand the conversation around the Bible and give voices to those who have long been unheard. With the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have the chance to retell foundational stories, so that the girls of the future will know that Sarah had a voice, and so do they. Thank you.
There's something hiding inside all of us. Deep within our DNA, we harbor the remnants of ancient viruses. These viruses, known as retroviruses, infected the reproductive cells of our ancestors millions of years ago. And now they're inside all of us as endogenous retroviruses. Today, these endogenous retroviruses make up over 8% of our DNA. One of these endogenous retroviruses is called endogenous retrovirus K, or ERV-K, and it has the ability to produce an important protein called integrase. Integrase functions by inserting viral DNA into host DNA, and this is how these viruses infected our DNA millions of years ago. Through this process, integrase causes DNA damage, and integrase itself does not have the ability to repair the damage it causes, and instead, it relies on our host repair mechanisms to recognize the damage and have it fixed. If this DNA damage is repaired successfully, the virus is integrated into our DNA. But this is not always the case. Sometimes that DNA damage is left unchecked and can accumulate, eventually leading to cell death. If this process were to occur in the brain, for example, it could lead to neurodegeneration. Now, fortunately for us, we don't really have to worry about this, as ERV-K integrase isn't typically expressed in healthy individuals. But ERV-K integrase has been found to be expressed in certain disease states. My lab has found increased expression of ERV-K integrase in the brain and spinal cord of patients with ALS. My research is focused on this ERV-K integrase protein and whether or not its expression in previously healthy cells eventually leads to the accumulation of DNA damage, inflammation, and eventually cell death. My goal is to determine if there is a link between ERV-K integrase expression and the neurodegeneration we see in ALS. Currently, we do not know what causes ALS, and because of this, there aren't many drugs available for patients. Patients have a progressive loss of muscle function that eventually leads to their death, typically only 2 to 5 years after their diagnosis. If we can determine a link between ERV-K integrase expression and the neurodegeneration in ALS, we can look at repurposing already FDA-approved integrase inhibitors as a new drug for patients with ALS who are in desperate need of treatment options. Thank you.
I'd like to start by asking you a question. Do you have a hobby? Likely you do. Now, how would you feel if you found out that your hobby had the ability to accelerate the effects of climate change, damage sensitive ecosystems, ruin relationships, and further displace Indigenous people? Well, my hobby is mountain biking, and it is no panacea. Much like oil and gas or logging, mountain biking belongs to an industry, and this industry is tourism. The tourism industry is relatively new, yet consumers are now spending more and more money on outdoor recreation, more than pharmaceuticals and fuel combined. In 2017, North Americans spent $887 billion on recreation. In British Columbia, mountain biking has grown from a fun pastime into a full-blown commercial pursuit. In the Sea to Sky corridor alone, mountain biking tourism is worth more than $70 million. To be clear, we have commercialized recreation and created tourism products. So why is this important? In BC, rural and Indigenous communities throughout the province are transitioning their economies from resource extraction to tourism in search of economic stability, increased socio-cultural benefits, and environmental sustainability, with many communities choosing mountain biking as their main tourism product. Unfortunately, an increasing amount of forest fires, user conflicts between trail users and stakeholders, and the desire to commodify the outdoors are creating land use management issues that cannot be solved with historical land use strategies. This leads into the research objectives of my study. The key objectives of the study is to examine how industries such as mountain bike tourism and resource extraction interact with land use policy, reinforce or disrupt colonial patterns of land use, and to determine what practices are actually tolerable on the land. Previous research has investigated the direct ecological and economic impacts of mountain biking, and currently there exist two main gaps. One, understanding power dynamics of land management, and two, how land use decisions can constrain or enhance social, cultural, and environmental development of rural and First Nation tourism economies. BC is an ideal setting for this research because it's the only province with a dedicated mountain bike tourism agency, a large proportion of unceded Indigenous territory, and is currently experiencing threats to rural livelihood due to climate change. My study will use in-depth interviews with key rural and First Nation stakeholders. And findings from this research will assist these stakeholders with the creation and development of a more sustainable tourism management strategy, one that is better able to adapt to the dynamic socio-political and environmental conditions currently impacting the province. Now, with all that being said, I think it's time we go for a ride.
Wasn't that just amazing? And the remarkable thing is this is a small sample of the research that graduate students are pursuing at universities across Canada. Now, we would like to give you the opportunity to vote for the People's Choice Award by placing your vote at uab.ca/3mt over the next 5 minutes. During this time, we will first listen to Alberta, the University of Alberta cheer song, written in 1935 and performed by our accomplished doctoral student, Mei Jun Chen, who recently completed a master's in performance and conducting in music. The composer is C. Lambert, and this arrangement is by Tom Dust and Mei Jun Chen. For those of you who have not been to Edmonton before, we will follow Mei Jun's performance with a quick tour of the city that is home to the University of Alberta. The moment we've all been waiting for is now upon us. I first want to acknowledge our finalists, who have really stepped up to prepare their presentations under such challenging circumstances. They have now joined me in this live stream, and I invite them all to turn on their cameras and ask you to join me in applauding their tremendous success. Judge Chris McLeod is with us, and he will be making the announcement of the honorable mention, runner-up, followed by the winner of the 2020 3NT Western Regional Finals.
Thank you, Brooke. On behalf of the judging panel, we felt very honored to be part of the Western Canadian 3-minute thesis. As you've just seen, these were extremely well done. Congratulations to everyone who participated and shared your thesis. Judging was very difficult, and I would first like to announce the honorable mention of the 2020 University of Alberta 3-minute thesis. And this honor goes to Shelby Bennett with her presentation, Deafening Silence, How the Sea Scrolls Expose the Silencing of Biblical Women, from Trinity Western University. Shelby, would you like to please join me and share a few words on what this 3-minute thesis journey has meant for you?
Wow, thank you so much. It means so much to get this award. It's a topic that I have often felt like is not something that's not easy to explain. So to be able to get it into a 3-minute thesis that clearly has actually made an impact, even on this level, is telling me that this is a message that people do want to hear and that people find is important. And that's exactly what I have been hoping for. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and congratulations again. It was really an outstanding thesis. The next award I'm going to announce is the runner-up for the 2020 University of Alberta 3-minute thesis. And this honor goes to Marta Ruiz with her presentation, Doppler Ultrasound to Predict Complications in Pediatric Liver Recipients, from the University of Alberta. Marta, would you please join me and share a few words on what this 3-minute thesis journey has meant for you?
Yes, thank you so much. This is so exciting. I am really grateful for this opportunity, and I think participating in the 3-minute thesis competition gave me a renewed confidence and gave me a lot of empowerment. So this has been a great experience, and thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, Marta. And again, it was absolutely a wonderful thesis. So congratulations very much. Now, next, let me announce the winner of the 2020 Western Regionals 3-minute thesis. And this honor goes to Alana Varner with her presentation, A Bumblebee Nest Site Roadmap, The Saving Grace of Mouse Pea, from Simon Fraser University. Alana, would you please join me and share a few words on what this 3-minute thesis has meant for you?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That's such an honor. Yeah, 3-minute thesis has been a journey I never expected to partake in when I started grad school, but it's definitely rounded out my education in a way I never imagined. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, and good luck at Nationals. We hope you bring home gold for Western Canada. So on behalf of the judging panel, again, thanks so much. Congratulations and good luck at the next step. We're now at the award decided by you, the People's Choice Award. Over 750 of you voted for this honor, and it goes to A Bumblebee Nest Site Roadmap, The Saving Grace of Mouse Pea. Again, Alana is the winner there as well. So wonderful to see that everyone agreed with the judging panel. So again, Alana, if you wouldn't mind maybe taking the opportunity to say thank you to someone who helped make this journey possible.
Awesome. Yeah, I would definitely have to say a big thanks to my whole lab group. I'm sure that's where a lot of my support has come from. And my partner and my family and my partner's family, who've all been supportive throughout this whole journey. So big thanks.
Thank you. And Brooke, back to you.
Great. Well, a hearty congratulations to all of our winners and also to our finalists today. I would also like to invite all of our participants and Judge Chris McLeod as well to congratulate once more all of our finalists. So you did a fantastic job today. Now, on behalf of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, our partners, the City of Edmonton and Edmonton Public Library, and on behalf of the viewers, I would like to give all of our finalists today once more a hearty round of applause acknowledging your excellence in research. So bravo. Thank you for making the 3MT Western Regional Finals a possibility, particularly in this COVID year, and also for making it such a success. To our live stream audience, thank you for supporting our students and joining us here in Canada and abroad.